Well, here's something you don't see every night. First-hand accounts of real-life exorcisms from Catholic priests trained by the Vatican.
Recent revelations about the Vatican have just uncovered its true nature.
You know, like
Dark.
How about
Dark.
that journalist who
Dark.
infiltrated the Vatican? You remember that?
For over 1,000 years, the Vatican City has been seen as home to the holiest men and a strong foundation of the Christian faith. However, the truth about what really happens there has shocked many. Is the Vatican truly run by Christians? What goes on behind its walls? Join us for this special episode as we expose the dark happenings and secrets the Vatican doesn't want us to know. The land of torment and secrets. A 2020 Joe Rogan podcast with Brian Callen, Brendan Schaub, and Eddie Bravo has resurfaced, and its contents have caused disturbance online. During the episode, they discussed an astonishing story about an openly homosexual French journalist who infiltrated the Vatican. This journalist entered the Vatican under the pretense of interviewing priests for a book. What he uncovered was far darker than anyone could imagine. After spending time behind the Vatican's walls, the journalist revealed in his book that many priests were homosexual and would go all out to protect themselves from external scrutiny. No one dared expose another because it would trigger a wave of retaliation. Each had their own dangerous skeletons. The secret code within the Vatican allowed some terrible things to happen, and young boys were sadly targeted. This serious situation has raised big questions about whether the Holy City is truly what it claims to be. In 2012, a book called His Holiness was published, revealing shocking details from secret papers belonging to Pope Benedict. These private documents were leaked by Benedict XVI's own butler to author Gianluigi Nuzzi. After the documents were examined, an investigation was launched. It uncovered that some people outside the Vatican were blackmailing bishops who had broken their promises of celibacy. Due to this scandal, Pope Benedict XVI made the difficult decision to resign from the papacy in 2013. This event shook many and made people wonder about the church's and its leaders' true nature. The podcast then turned toward history, discussing the roots of the Roman Catholic Church. Constantine, the Roman emperor, was once a pagan with ties to ancient practices that some even considered Luciferian. When he converted to Christianity, it wasn't out of belief, but as a strategic move. He aimed to pull people back into faith, turning the Christian church into a mighty empire. How valid is this claim? Constantine and the early church.
Well, if you know the history of the Roman Catholic Church, you know Constantine, this is like mainstream history. Constantine.
In the early years of the 4th century, Constantine's rise to power changed the course of history. By AD 306, he was named emperor.
History of the Vatican began in the 4th century AD when Constantine built the first Christian basilica.
And by AD 324, he controlled the entire Roman Empire. But it was what happened next that truly shaped the future. In AD 325, Constantine called for the First Council of Nicaea. This meeting wasn't just any gathering. It was a pivotal moment where significant changes to Christian beliefs were formally accepted. The council debated topics like the nature of God and how Easter should be celebrated. But this was only the latest chapter in a longer, darker story of transformation. Before Constantine, Christianity had endured more than 2 centuries of brutal persecution. The Roman Empire, under leaders like Emperor Nero, had seen Christians as enemies, tormenting and prosecuting those who refused to renounce their faith. By the end of the 3rd century, the persecution had spread across the empire. Christians who refused to worship Roman gods or the emperor were dealt with in horrifying ways. Under Emperor Decius, in the mid-3rd century, a harsh new edict was issued. Those who claimed to follow Christ were forced to bow before Roman idols or face execution. Decius believed this would restore Rome's former glory by uniting everyone under their ancient pagan religion. It was a time of fear and bloodshed, but within a few decades, everything changed. How did Roman society go from hating Christianity
Christ. They're not Christian.
Look at this
they're
St.
lying.
Peter's Basilica.
to embracing it under Constantine? The shift began slowly. Over time, Christian leaders started to tolerate or even adopt practices that weren't part of their original faith. By the 2nd century, thinkers like Clement of Alexandria blended Christian beliefs with Greek philosophy. They urged Christians to be open to new ideas, including those rooted in pagan traditions. In Rome, the 2nd century Bishop Victor I sparked a major controversy by proposing a new way to celebrate the resurrection. He insisted it be observed on Sunday, replacing the traditional Passover celebration. Slowly, practices like these took root, and by the time Constantine rose to power, Christianity had absorbed many pagan customs. The faith was transforming, and Constantine played a critical role in its evolution. Raised as a pagan who worshipped the unconquered sun, Constantine didn't completely abandon his old beliefs. Instead, he blended them with Christianity. On the eve of the Battle of Milvian Bridge in AD 312, Constantine ordered his soldiers to paint a Christian symbol on their shields. But this symbol wasn't purely Christian. It was rooted in ancient Egyptian symbolism. By then, Christianity had been heavily influenced by pagan traditions, including the use of symbols, festivals, and even the concept of a divine trinity. In AD 321, Constantine declared that Sunday, the venerable day of the sun, would be a day of rest. This was a nod to his pagan roots, but it soon became part of Christian practice. Later, in AD 303, the Council of Laodicea officially adopted Sunday worship over the traditional Sabbath. Constantine had accomplished what Decius could not. While Decius tried to unite the empire under paganism, Constantine did so under a new, transformed version of Christianity, one that had absorbed many pagan practices. This transformation was so profound that even today, remnants of those pagan traditions are still present in many Christian practices. For believers, this is a chilling revelation. The Vatican has been concealing this for years.
Is the largest branch of Christianity, and its home is Vatican City in the center of Rome.
But the real question is, are they actively trying to hide it, or do they simply not care? In plain sight, beneath layers of tradition, the Vatican has boldly shown its true nature. They've left clues hidden in plain view through encrypted symbols, artwork, and rituals. Far from covering their tracks, they seem almost fearless in revealing their true form to those who dare to look closer. Blasphemous architecture. Eddie Bravo then revealed how mysterious the Pope's audience hall,
This is the audience hall that was built for the Pope,
which was built in 1971, was. For years, it stood unnoticed, but recently, many have turned their attention to this unusual building. And what makes the hall so unsettling is that it contains absolutely no traditional Christian symbols. From the back of the room, the stage and hall take on the unmistakable shape of a giant serpent's head. The Pope, seated at the center, appears framed between two massive fangs. The stained glass windows on each side resemble cold, glaring eyes. While this reptilian appearance is only visible from certain angles, those entering the hall from the back can't help but notice its striking similarity to a snake. The hall, which seats nearly 6,500 people, stretches out beyond the Vatican walls and into Italy. Conspiracy theorists have wildly claimed that the Vatican has been overtaken by Satanists, or that a coup in the 1960s replaced Pope Paul VI with a double. Others whisper about a shadowy group of reptilian beings secretly running the church. Is this all an elaborate message hidden in plain sight, or simply a strange coincidence? Well, it's certainly no mere coincidence. The design feels too deliberate, too precise, and what makes it even more eerie is what sits right in the middle of the snake's gaping mouth.
The eyes of a snake, the head of a snake, and the fangs. That is
Where it is,
scary.
you can see that resurrection thing right there.
Oh my God.
Oh, it's all the same
resurrection
thing.
You see that? Oh, it's
A mysterious structure that only deepens the unsettling atmosphere of the hall. The resurrection statue. Eddie couldn't stop talking about how two-sided the Vatican was, and then revealed the resurrection statue. Sculpted in 1977 by Pericles Fazzini, it was a massive structure, 66 feet long and 23 feet tall, made of bronze and copper. It loomed behind the Pope in the Vatican's Paul VI audience hall, which had become the center of numerous conspiracy theories. And it was easy to see why. The sculpture, towering over the frail Pope, gave off a disturbing energy.
How much he did and did not appease the Nazis. We know that he did actually a great deal as head of the church to support.
Unlike anything you'd expect in such a sacred space. Although it was meant to represent Christ's resurrection, the statue looked far more sinister, twisted, like melted snakes entwined together. It seemed as if some kind of dark creature was rising from the depths of bubbling black goo. One could almost imagine it crawling out of a nightmare. Fazzini must have drawn his inspiration from something far darker than religious iconography, perhaps the depths of a horror movie. The hall itself was where the Pope held his weekly meetings whenever the weather outside wasn't good enough for St. Peter's Square. But the eerie sculpture behind him stole the attention. Its purpose, believe it or not, was to shock those who saw it for the first time. According to Fazzini, he wanted to remind the audience that, as Christians, They shouldn't fear the chaos that would come with Christ's resurrection. Instead, they should embrace it, no matter how terrifying it appears. The resurrection was meant to symbolize the end of the world, a world consumed in a terrifying storm of chaos and destruction, but one that would bring about the ultimate rebirth. The more Eddie described it, the more unsettling it became. The message behind the sculpture was supposed to be hope.
It looks like a Slayer album cover.
The restoration of the statue of the resurrection
I've never seen that, though.
has become Satan's throne.
But something was chilling about the idea that it was meant to prepare people for a world-ending catastrophe. Still on hell-like things in the Vatican, let's journey to its foundations. The Vatican necropolis. Under the most famous basilica in the world lies a haunting city of the dead. This scary necropolis is hidden under Vatican City's St. Peter's Basilica.
City of the Dead, or necropolis, just underneath the Vatican.
Above ground, visitors marvel at stunning artwork, intricate frescoes, and centuries of rich history. But 5 stories below, in the cold darkness, lies a forgotten ruin dating back to the early days of the Roman Empire. At the heart of this history is the altar of St. Peter's. It sits atop a chilling layer of bones, the remains of countless souls resting in silence beneath it. Many of these bodies are not even Christian or Catholic. The oldest burial site, dating back to the 1st century AD, was once a resting place for pagans. Above this, another level from the 5th century tells a different story, a mix of both pagans and Christians during a time when Europe was slowly turning to Catholicism. These 2 layers alone span nearly 90% of the Roman Empire's reign, from 27 BC to 476 AD. While everyone knows St. Peter's Basilica for its grandeur, it has long been a sacred site, steeped in ancient significance. In a shocking twist, there's a hidden church buried beneath the basilica's floor, along with an even older church from the 12th century. The Vatican might get a pass for its foundation, but still some of its very best can be compared to El Chapo, the Pope's escape tunnels. The Passetto di Borgo looks like any old stone wall in Vatican City, but it holds a captivating secret. Stretching 2,600 feet from the city to Castel Sant'Angelo,
in 1277, the castle was connected to Vatican City with a corridor that was named Passetto.
This hidden passage was once a crucial escape route for popes in danger. Built starting in 850 AD by Pope Nicholas III, it took nearly 650 years to complete and finally finish during the reign of Pope Alexander VI in 1492. This pope is often remembered for his corrupt ways, using his power and wealth to support his illegitimate children. Yet, ironically, he completed the passage just in time. When the French invaded 2 years later, he used this secret tunnel to make a hasty escape. Despite the immense effort put into its construction, only a few popes have ever needed this passage. The last notable escape occurred in 1527, when Pope Clement VII fled from the mutinous troops of the Holy Roman Emperor's army. In 2000, to celebrate the Roman Catholic Church's Great Jubilee year, the Passetto was refurbished. In recent years, the church has opened this intriguing tunnel to visitors for a limited time each summer, allowing a glimpse into a mysterious world where popes once escaped danger and uncertainty. What else is hidden underneath the Vatican? St. Peter's bones. A decade ago, the Vatican revealed a mysterious box for the first time. Inside, they believe lie the ancient bones of St. Peter.
St. Peter was one of Jesus' 12 apostles. His spirit, Catholics believe, now guards the gates of heaven.
The apostle and first bishop of Rome, Pope Francis, the 266th bishop of Rome, made this bold decision. This moment was significant, as no pope before 2013 had ever confirmed that the 8 bone fragments hidden beneath St. Peter's Basilica belonged to St. Peter himself. The bones were discovered deep in the grottos beneath the basilica in 1939, a maze of history stretching back 2,000 years. Yet, even today, no one can say for sure if these bones truly belonged to the apostle. In 1968, Pope Paul VIII acknowledged that the connection seemed convincing, but could not provide solid evidence to support the claim. In 2013, the Vatican decided to embrace the mystery without hesitation. However, many questions linger. What if the bones in that old chest don't belong to Peter at all? Author Bruno Bartolini, who wrote The Ears of the Vatican, pointed out that no pope has ever allowed scientists to study the bones, perhaps out of fear of the truth. Adding to the intrigue, hidden documents in the Vatican speak of a 1,000-year-old curse on St. Peter's tomb. According to legend, anyone who dares to open it will face terrible misfortune. Still, on curses and spells, is the Vatican practicing magic? The Black Magic Grimoire. The Black Magic Grimoire is exactly what it sounds like, an ancient book filled with dark spells and secrets. Dated anywhere from 1452 to 1521, its exact origin remains a mystery, with historians unable to agree on when the first edition was published. Expert Owen Davies claims it was first printed in 1702, while some mainstream scholars argue it was a 19th century hoax. What we know about the Black Magic Grimoire, also known as the Grand Grimoire, is shrouded in vagueness. The introduction was likely penned by Antonio Veneciana del Rabina, who drew much of his knowledge from the legendary King Solomon's original writings. The spells inside are eerie variations of the Key of Solomon and the Red Dragon, designed to invoke dark powers. But what does this sinister book have to do with the Vatican? Rumors whisper that an original copy is hidden somewhere in their secret archives. While knowing the truth behind these claims is hard, it wouldn't be surprising. The Vatican archives house countless significant religious texts, making it plausible they would conceal a book capable of summoning Lucifer and granting the power to strike a deal with the devil. How true is this? Lucifer in the Vatican. Some people say that deep within the Vatican lies proof of the devil's existence. These are the same folks who believe the Vatican hides evidence of aliens. In another strange twist, some think the entire Catholic Church, including Vatican City and the Pope, is controlled by Lucifer, puppets dancing to the devil's tune. We may never know if the devil truly exists. The Holy Trinity Church in Westminster is the only church featuring a devil. This church was built to celebrate Napoleon's defeat, and inside it, you can find a peculiar statue of Lucifer, created by an artist named Paul Fryer. His creepy statue is made of wax, with wings crafted from real feathers tangled in power cables. This unsettling figure is one of the most disturbing sights in any church, especially one that has stood for over a century. Although the church hasn't been a place of worship since the 1930s, it remains just an artist's disturbing creation, not proof that the devil is in charge of the Vatican. Yet, the idea of hidden secrets and dark forces lurking beneath the surface continues to spread even within the Vatican walls. As they say, in every little rumor, there is an iota of truth in it. The next revelation is one that will leave any Christian questioning the intent in this great city. The Vatican obelisk. In the heart of St. Peter's Square in Vatican City stands an ancient monument called the Vatican obelisk.
As you get to St. Peter's Square, the first inscriptions you see are the ones on the Vatican obelisk.
While many people may not know its name, almost everyone would recognize it from pictures of the square. This massive pillar, resembling a giant Egyptian obelisk from thousands of years ago, towers proudly at the center of the plaza. But this impressive monument has a dark history. The obelisk is truly ancient. It was taken from the Egyptian city of Heliopolis during the cruel reign of the infamous Roman Emperor Caligula. However, the story behind this obelisk is even more chilling. The Romans built a unique ship to transport it from Egypt to Rome, but once it arrived, it became a site of suffering for early Christians. The obelisk stood in the circus of Gaius and Nero during St. Peter's crucifixion. Here, Romans brought Christians to the base of this very pillar, where many were brutally executed. After the circus fell into disuse, the area around Vatican Hill became a cemetery. Throughout the Middle Ages, the obelisk remained in the same spot, surrounded by the blood of those who had died for their faith. Finally, in 1586, the monument was moved from its original position to stand proudly in the center of the piazza, a silent witness to its haunting past. But why was it in the middle of the Vatican? Is there no sympathy for the innocents who were prosecuted? The Vatican's partnership with Nazis. After the victory of the Allied forces in Germany, which ended World War II, many Nazis sought refuge outside Europe. Thousands of them fled to South American countries, especially Argentina, Chile, and Brazil. Harvard researcher Gerald Steinacher wrote a revealing book that includes travel documents suggesting the Vatican helped these Nazis escape. He believes this was done in hopes of reviving European Christianity and out of fear of the Soviet Union's growing power. However, the Vatican has not commented on these serious claims. Not only did the Vatican assist in the escape of thousands of Nazis, but it also helped smuggle stolen Nazi art, gold, and other valuables that belonged to Jewish families. In 2020, the Vatican released millions of documents about Pope Pius XII that had been hidden away for years. These include transcripts of secret talks between the Pope and Nazi leaders. A new book, titled The Pope at War, The Secret History of Pius XII, Mussolini, and Hitler, by historian David Kurtzer, takes a deeper look at these important revelations. Many people know two very different stories about Pope Pius XII. Some say he was Hitler's pope and didn't care about Jewish people, while others believe he did everything he could to save them during the war. After examining the new documents, Kurtzer believes both views are extreme and not entirely true. He explains that, in the early years of the war, Pius XII was worried the Nazis might win. His main concern was to protect the church in a Europe that could fall under Nazi control. This didn't mean he liked the Nazis or Hitler, but he felt he had to plan for a challenging future. One shocking discovery from the newly opened archives is that soon after Pius XII became pope in 1939, Hitler saw an opportunity to negotiate. A personal envoy, a colorful figure who was a Nazi prince and the great-grandson of Queen Victoria, began secret talks with the Pope. In a critical moment during the war, on October 16, 1943, the Nazis rounded up about 1,260 Jews in Rome. They were held near the Vatican for 2 days. The Vatican worked hard to argue that some of these people had been baptized and shouldn't be treated as Jews. As a result, around 250 were freed, but the majority were sent to Auschwitz, where most sadly did not survive. Kurtzer also reveals that when the Cardinal Secretary of State of the Vatican met with the German ambassador, he was discouraged from protesting the Nazi actions, as the orders came directly from Hitler. When asked if the Vatican has responded to these revelations, Kurtzer notes that while other national Catholic churches have begun to face this history, the Vatican has not fully addressed it. In the past, they stated that their views of Jews had nothing to do with the Holocaust. As for the push to make Pius XII a saint, Kurtzer suggests that those who support this should reconsider the history. However, he fears that some may not be willing to change their minds. Gerald Posner, an American journalist, also claims that Bernardino Nogara, the Vatican's financial advisor, was suspected of being a Nazi spy. He is believed to have created a chilling scheme that allowed the Vatican to invest in Italian insurance companies. These companies kept the money from life insurance plans belonging to murdered Jewish families. Since the Vatican was just an investor, it didn't have to return any profits from this troubling plan. Secrets like these would have definitely led to the deaths of many, and even the popes are not safe within the Vatican walls. The death of Pope John Paul I. In September 1978, Pope John Paul I died suddenly and without warning, just 33 days after he became the leader of the Catholic Church. His unexpected death raised many questions, as conflicting reports emerged about what really happened. There were strange issues with his death certificate, and to this day, nobody knows for sure what caused the demise of one of the shortest-serving popes in history. Whispers in the Vatican revealed that the Vatican Bank, run by corrupt officials, feared Pope John Paul I would expose their wrongdoings. Allegedly, they murdered him to protect their shady financial practices. The corruption within the Vatican is well documented. Bishop Paul Marcinkus, who led the Vatican's Institute for Works of Religion, one of the most powerful financial institutions in the world, was deeply involved in this corruption. He was indicted in 1982 for his role in the collapse of Banco Ambrosiano, which lost about $3.5 billion. Another key figure in this scandal was Roberto Calvi, an accomplice of Marcinkus and a member of an illegal Italian Masonic lodge. Calvi was found dead in London in 1982, just weeks before the corruption scandal became public. His death was ruled a suicide, but many conspiracy theories swirl around the circumstances of his passing. From an outside perspective, it seems possible that Pope John Paul I was killed to protect the bank. However, the scandal was ultimately too big to conceal. Strangely, this is not the only pope to have been assassinated in the Holy City. The death of Pope John VII. Pope John VII, who ruled from December 14, 872, until his death on December 16, 882, was a significant figure in the history of the papacy. Considered one of the most capable popes of the 9th century, John dedicated much of his time to stopping the advance of Muslim forces in southern Italy. Despite his efforts to seek help from powerful allies like the Franks and Byzantines, he ultimately had to fortify Rome's defenses himself. One of his key actions was supporting Methodius of Thessalonica, a missionary to the Slavs. John defended Methodius against local rulers who opposed his use of the Slavonic language in religious services. When Methodius was imprisoned, John was furious and demanded his release, insisting that the Bible be translated into Slavonic. He believed that all languages were meant to praise God. However, John's challenges extended beyond language. Having witnessed a devastating Arab raid as a young man, he saw firsthand how the expanding Muslim presence threatened the Papal States. His calls for military assistance often fell on deaf ears, forcing him to pay tribute to the Emirate of Sicily. Despite his efforts to unite Christian cities against the Saracens, his attempts were met with resistance, as many viewed his leadership as an overreach. In 876, John traveled through Campania, rallying support from cities like Salerno and Naples to defend against further raids. He also worked to strengthen the walls of Rome and established a papal fleet for protection. In addition to these military struggles, John dealt with complex relations in Constantinople. He recognized Photios I as the legitimate patriarch, hoping to secure Byzantine support against the Muslim threat. However, this decision stirred controversy and ultimately led to conflicts within the church. Tragically, John's papacy ended violently. In 882, he was assassinated by his own clerics, poisoned, and then clubbed to death. The motives behind this brutal act may have included his financial struggles, lack of support, and inability to halt the Saracen raids. His death marked a turning point for the papacy, which became increasingly vulnerable to the ambitions of local nobility in the years that followed. If you think killing a pope in the Vatican is the height of what happens there, you are in for a shock. The dead pope who faced trial. In the year 897, the Vatican became the stage for one of history's strangest events, the trial of a dead pope. Pope Formosus, who had passed away just a few months earlier, found himself accused by his living successor, Pope Stephen VII. This trial was anything but ordinary. Stephen had Formosus's body dug up, dressed in his papal robes, and propped up on a throne to face judgment. A deacon was even chosen to speak for the silent corpse. As Stephen hurled accusations at Formosus, the lifeless body did not respond, remaining eerily still. Historian George Ives described the scene, saying the old man's body resembled a monstrous doll, wobbling if propped up or collapsing into a grotesque heap if left alone. The atmosphere was tense, with shadows lurking in the corners, hinting at the dark mysteries surrounding this bizarre event. During the trial, an earthquake suddenly shook the room, which many interpreted as a divine warning. It seemed even the stones of the Vatican were crying out against this mockery of justice, but Stephen paid no heed and pressed on, declaring Formosus guilty of usurping the papacy. He invalidated all of Formosus's actions as pope, stripping him of his status and dignity. In a shocking act, the body was stripped of its delicate garments and dressed in rags, and 3 fingers, those used for blessings, were severed. Finally, Formosus's body was thrown into the Tiber River, a place reserved for those who faced eternal disgrace. However, Stephen's victory was short-lived. Just months later, he was imprisoned and strangled, his papacy ending after only a year. In this turbulent time, becoming a pope felt like a death sentence. Each new pope faced deadly political games, and many met grim fates. Stephen's immediate successors had brief reigns. Romanus lasted only 92 days, and Theodore II barely 3 weeks. As for Formosus, a fisherman soon found his body floating in the Tiber and returned it to St. Peter's Basilica. The chronicler Ludeprand of Cremona noted how saints' images seemed to honor Formosus as he was placed back in his coffin, a testament to his lasting significance. By casting Formosus into the Tiber, Stephen VII followed a dark tradition. For centuries, the river had been a dumping ground for the bodies of infamous criminals and defeated enemies. The Tiber had carried away many a disgraced figure, leaving them lost to memory. Why would Stephen go to such lengths to destroy an enemy who was already dead? In the medieval era, the bodies of holy people were seen as powerful relics deeply tied to faith and community. These relics were central to religious life and believed to possess miraculous abilities. A saint's presence continued through their remains, guiding and aiding their followers even after death. By denying Formosus his resting place, Stephen VII sought to erase his influence completely. Oddly enough, by putting Formosus on trial and treating him as if he were alive, Stephen aimed to destroy him forever. Yet, in doing so, he only ensured that the bizarre episode of the dead pope would be remembered throughout history. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.